morning. Our next lesson regarding supply is actually what's going to cause the supply curve to shift. But before we get there, I want to make sure that you understand what directional shift is an increase and what directional shift is a decrease. Okay? And I'm telling you this now. You have to think about this in terms of left and right, not up and down. If you think up and down, you will get it wrong every time. You have to think shift to the left or shift to the right. Stand up, sit, fight, whatever. Okay? Now, a shift to the right. A shift to the right is what we call an increase in supply. And so if we have our original supply curve, this black line, S1, is our original supply curve. The S2 represents an increase in supply. Okay? We shifted to the right. The shift to the right is the increase. This shift to the left is a decrease. So this S3, in comparison with S1, is what we call a decrease in supply. Now, what causes this? There are 4 determinants of supply. They're written on the board here. If you can't see them, that's fine. These are more so for me than they are for you. Okay? But price of inputs, number of firms in the industry, taxes, and technology. These are also in your textbook under determinants of supply. Okay? And also in your notes. Okay? So the price of inputs, number of firms in the industry, taxes, and technology. All right? And so if we go back to our previous lesson talking about garbage cans, so supply of garbage cans. Okay, so this is our original supply of garbage cans. Okay, and we're talking about price of inputs. An input is anything that deals with the cost of production. So either an increase or a decrease in the price of inputs will either increase or decrease supply. So what do I mean by that? Well, what can be considered an input? How about salary or wages? If you lower wages of your workers, that means that the business now has more money to increase production. So a decrease in wages for the workers will then increase overall supply. Okay? Or put here, for this original supply curve for garbage cans, and at the garbage can factory, all of a sudden there's an across-the-board 10% pay cut, then in theory, that supplier of garbage cans should be able to increase overall supply by shifting the supply curve to the right because they've decreased their inputs, the price of inputs. Okay? Other ways to either alter the price of inputs, might include like your utility costs or healthcare costs, things of this nature. So, utility costs, if it's all of a sudden, you start installing energy efficient light bulbs, and your energy costs decrease, well then you can increase supply. Okay, but we all know usually utility costs don't go down, they go up, and so that will cause the supply curve to shift to the left from S1 to S3, an increase in utilities, lights, water, things of that nature. These are utilities, and these things normally get more expensive. So as those get more expensive, supply will decrease as a result, or shift to the left as a result. Okay? Number of firms in the industry. Number of firms in the industry, well, think about the idea of the smartphone or the touch screen or things of that nature. If you have one company that makes it and they're all of a sudden making a lot of money, well, all of a sudden what's going to happen is more companies are going to want to make something very similar to that, causing an increase in supply. The more firms that are in an industry, more firms that enter an industry will increase overall supply. So, what has happened, let's say we switch this now from garbage cans to smartphones. What has happened to the overall supply of smartphones as more and more companies enter the industry to include smartphone production? Well, we're going from S1 to S2. Likewise, as we look at, on the flip side of that, let's look at like Garmin or TomTom. Okay, Garmin or TomTom, as more and more people want smartphones, people are leaving the industry of GPS devices because people don't need them. They said, I've got it on my handheld already. And so what happens there is, as firms leave the industry, this also ties in with technology, as firms leave the industry, then supply will decrease, move from S1 to S3 or from black to red. Okay? The more firms that enter the industry, supply will go up. As firms leave the industry, supply will go down or decrease. Okay? If more firms, shift to the right. For fewer firms, shift to the left. Okay? Again, don't think of it in terms of up and down. All right? Taxes. This is one that our Governor Rick Snyder is hoping happens. And I'll come back to this idea when we get into the overall interaction between supply and demand. Okay? The Snyder Plan deals with lowering taxes on small businesses. Lowering taxes on small businesses should increase productivity and increase output. Maybe not productivity, but increase output. Increase quantity supplied. Okay? Or take that back, just increase overall supply. By lowering taxes, which in my mind it seems like this is more of an input than anything else. It seems like taxes would be an input, but for whatever reason, your author calls it a different determinant altogether. In my mind, though, a tax is an input, so whatever. So taxes function in a very similar manner to prices of inputs. Okay? If there's a tax increase on businesses, supply will decrease. If there's a tax decrease, supply will increase. All right? Seems obvious, but obviously we have to go over it. And then the last one is technology. As technology improves or when technology increases, supply will increase. All right? You look at the assembly line. Henry Ford's perfection of the assembly line allowed him to spit out the Model A's, Model T's, Model whatevers much more efficiently. And through fostering that efficiency, he was able to increase overall supply because of this new technology. Okay? But then also technology, as I mentioned before, can also decrease supply when you look at the impact of smartphones on the supply of GPS devices. As more smartphones, as technology improves for smartphones, people say, I don't need a GPS device anymore. I don't need a Garmin. I don't need a TomTom. I don't need these things anymore. And businesses, as a result, will produce less. Or they'll just exit the industry altogether. Garmin, TomTom, there's a few others. Okay, they'll just say we're not going to make those anymore. So supply for GPS devices will decrease as a result of that. Okay? Again, review the determinants of supply, and don't think of the shift of supply going, oh, supply went above the original curve or went below. Don't think of it that way. You've got to think of the shifts in terms of left and right. Okay? A shift to the right is an increase. A shift to the left is a decrease in supply.